Greetings and salutations, dear viewers. Get ready for some fantastic content. Welcome, everyone, to our latest video where we'll be exploring Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Armagh. The Archdiocese of Armagh is a Latin ecclesiastical territory or archdiocese of the Catholic Church located in the northern part of Ireland. The ordinary is the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Armagh, who is also the Metropolitan of the Ecclesiastical province of Armagh and the Primate of All Ireland. The mother church is St. Patrick's Cathedral. The claim of the Archdiocese to pre-eminence in Ireland as the primatial see rests upon its traditional establishment by St. Patrick circa 445. It was recognised as a Metropolitan province in 1152 by the Synod of Kells. The incumbent Archbishop is Eamon Martin. He has been assisted since 2019 by Michael Router, who is currently the only Catholic auxiliary bishop in Ireland. As we enter this new phase, let's analyse province and geographic remit from different angles and evaluate its significance. The province of Armagh is one of the four ecclesiastical provinces that together form the Roman Catholic Church in Ireland. The others are Dublin, Tuam and Cashel. The geographical remit of the province straddles both political jurisdictions on the island of Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. In Northern Ireland, the remit covers parts of the former administrative counties of Armagh, Londonderry and Tyrone. In the Republic of Ireland, the remit covers parts of County Louth and most of County Meath. It contains the city of Armagh and the large towns Ardee, Collisland, Drogheda, Dundalk, Dungannon and Magherafelt. The suffragan dioceses of the Metropolitan Province are Riada and Clonmacnoise, Clogherderry Down and Conadromor Kilmormeath Raphoe. As we enter this new phase, let's analyse foundation and early history from different angles and evaluate its significance. St. Patrick, having received some grants of land from the chieftain Dea, on the hill called Ardmacha, the height of Macha, built a stone church on the summit and a monastery and some other religious edifice and fixed on this place for his metropolitan see. He also founded a school in the same place, which soon became famous and attracted thousands of scholars. In the course of time other religious bodies settled in Armagh, such as the Culdees, who built a monastery there in the 8th century. The city of Armagh was thus until modern times a purely ecclesiastical establishment. About 448, St. Patrick, aided by Secundinus and Ausilius, two of his disciples, held a synod at Armagh of which some of the canons are still extant. One of these expressly mentions that all difficult cases of conscience should be referred to the judgment of the Archbishop of Armagh, and that if too difficult to be disposed of by him with his councillors, they should be passed on to the Apostolic See of Rome. In Irish times, the primacy of Armagh was questioned only by the great southern centre of the Irish Church, at Cashel. For many centuries the primates were accustomed to make circuits and visitations through various parts of the country for the collection of their dues. This was called the Catholicus, or the Law of St. Patrick. Beginning in 734, during the incumbency of Primate Congus, it continued until long after the Cambro-Norman invasion, but ceased as soon as Norman prelates succeeded to the see. Two kings gave it their royal sanction, Phelim, King of Munster, in 822, and Brian Boru, in 1006. The record of the latter's sanction is preserved in the Book of Armagh, in the handwriting of Brian Boru's chaplain. To add solemnity to their collecting tours, the primates were in the habit of carrying with them the shrine of St. Patrick, and as a rule their success was certain. These collections seem to have been made at irregular intervals and were probably for the purpose of keeping up the famous School of Armagh, said at one time to contain 7,000 students, as well as for the restoration, often needed, of the church and other ecclesiastical buildings when destroyed by fire or plundered in war. The Irish annals record no fewer than 17 burnings of the city, either partial or total. It was plundered on numerous occasions by the Danes and the clergy driven out of it. It was also sacked during the conquest of Ulster by the Cambro-Normans. In this segment, we'll be unraveling the complexities of disputes over primacy and exploring its multifaceted nature. The seizure of the primacy of Armagh by laymen in the 11th century has received great prominence owing to St. Bernard's denunciation of it in his Life of St. Malachy, but the abuse was not without a parallel on the continent of Europe. The chiefs of the tribe in whose territory Armagh stood usurped the position and temporal emoluments of the primacy and discharged by deputy the ecclesiastical functions. The abuse continued for 8 generations until Selleck, known as St. Celsus, who was intruded as a layman, had himself consecrated bishop, and ruled the see with great wisdom. In 1111 he held a great synod at Fiadmake Angus, at which were present 50 bishops, 300 priests, and 3,000 other ecclesiastics, and also Murrough O'Brien, King of Southern Ireland, and his nobles. During his incumbency the Priory of Sts. Peter and Paul at Armagh was refounded by Eamon, the learned preceptor of St. Malachy. This was the first establishment in Ireland into which the canons regular of St. Augustine had been introduced. Rory O'Connor, High King of Ireland, afterwards granted it an annual pension for a public school. After a short interval, Celsus was succeeded by St. Malachy Osmorgea, who later suffered many tribulations in trying to effect a reformation in the diocese. He resigned the see after 3 years and retired to the bishopric of Down. In 1139 he went to Rome and solicited the Pope for 2 palliums, one for the see of Armagh and the other probably for a new Metropolitan see of Cashel. The following year he introduced the Cistercian order into Ireland by the advice of St. Bernard. He died at Clairvaux while making a second journey to Rome. St. Malachy is honoured as the patron saint of the diocese. Gelasius succeeded him and during a long incumbency of 37 years held many important synods which effected great reforms. At the Synod of Kells, held in 1152 and presided over by Cardinal Paparo, the Pope's legate Gelasius received the pallium, and at the same time 3 others were handed over to the new Metropolitan sees of Dublin, Cashel, and Tuam. The successor of Gelasius in the see, Cornelius Mac Concale, who died at Chambry the following year, on a journey to Rome, has been venerated ever since in that locality as a saint. He was succeeded by Gilbert O'Curran, during whose incumbency the see suffered greatly from the depredations of the Anglo-Norman invaders. William Fitz-Aldhelm pillaged Armagh and carried away St. Patrick's crosier, called the Staff of Jesus. O'Curran's successor was Thomas O'Connor. In the year after his succession to the see, Pope Lucius III, at the instance of John Comyn, the first English prelate in the see of Dublin, tried to abolish the old Irish custom according to which the primates claimed the right of making solemn circuits and visitations in the province of Leinster as well as those of Tuam and Munster. The papal bull issued was to the effect that no archbishop or bishop should hold any assembly or ecclesiastical court in the diocese of Dublin, or treat of the ecclesiastical causes and affairs of the said diocese, without the consent of the Archbishop of Dublin, if the latter were actually in his see, unless specially authorized by the papal see or the apostolic legate. This bull laid the groundwork of a bitter and protracted controversy between the archbishops of Armagh and of Dublin, concerning the primatial right of the former to have his cross carried before him and to try ecclesiastical cases in the diocese of the latter. This contest, however, must not be confounded with that regarding the primacy, which did not arise until the 17th century. Brace yourself for a deep dive into Lordship of Ireland as we explore its impact and relevance in our evolving narrative. Lordship of Ireland. As the first Anglo-Norman adventurers who came to Ireland showed very little scruple in despoiling the churches and monasteries, Armagh suffered considerably from their depredations. When the English kings got a footing in the country, they began to intervene in the election of bishops, and a contest arose between King John and Pope Innocent III regarding Eugene MacGillivray, elected to the primatial see in 1203. This prelate was present at the Fourth Council of the Lateran in 1215 and died at Rome the following year. The English kings also began to claim possession of the temporalities of the sees during vacancies and to insist on the newly elected bishops suing them humbly for their restitution. Primate Reginald, a Dominican, obtained a papal brief uniting the county of Louth to the See of Armagh. Primate Patrick O'Scanlan, also a Dominican, rebuilt to a large extent the Cathedral of Armagh and founded a house for Franciscans in that city. Primate Nicholas MacMaillis convened an important assembly of the bishops and clergy of Ireland at Durham in 1291, at which they bound themselves by solemn oaths to resist the encroachments of the secular power. Primate Richard Fitzralph contended publicly both in Ireland and England with the mendicant orders on the question of their vows and privileges. A contest regarding the primacy of Armagh was carried on intermittently during these centuries by the Archbishops of Dublin and Cashel, especially the former, as the city of Dublin was the civic metropolis of the kingdom. During the English period, the primates rarely visited the city of Armagh, preferring to reside at the archiepiscopal manors of Dromiskin and Termonfeshin, in the county of Louth, which was within the Pale. During the reign of Henry VIII, Primate Cromer, being suspected of heresy by the Holy See, was deposed in favour of Robert Wauchope, a distinguished theologian, who assisted at the Council of Trent. In the meantime, George Devil, a zealous supporter of Henry, had been elevated into the Church of Ireland's See of Armagh by that monarch, but upon the introduction of the Book of Common Prayer in the reign of Edward VI, he left Ireland in disgust. In the beginning of the reign of Queen Mary I, Dowell was appointed properly by the Pope on account of the great zeal he had shown against Protestantism. He survived his consecration only 3 months. Let's now turn our attention to during the English Reformation and uncover the fascinating insights it brings to the table. After the short incumbency of Donaghadh, the see was filled by Richard Creagh, a native of Limerick. He was lawfully arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London, where he was judicially examined and left to languish in captivity for some years until his death. Edward Macaron, who succeeded him, was very active in soliciting aid from the Pope and Philip I of Spain for the Irish who were then engaged in a struggle with the Crown. After an interval of 8 years, Macaron was succeeded by Peter Lombard, not to be confused with Peter Lombard, the medieval Bishop of Paris. He remained in exile in Rome during the whole 24 years of his incumbency and thus never once visited his diocese. Hugh Macawell, a Franciscan, was consecrated abroad for the see in 1626, but died before he could reach it. Hugh O'Reilly, the next primate, was very active in the political movements of his day. In the chaotic aftermath of the Irish Rebellion of 1641, in 1642, he summoned the Ulster bishops and clergy to a synod at Kells, in which the war then carried on by the Irish was declared lawful and pious. He took a prominent part in the Irish Confederation of Kilkenny and was appointed a member of the Supreme Council of 24 persons who carried on the government of the country in the name of King Charles I. During the Cromwellian conquest of Ireland, Ireland was reconquered by English parliamentarian forces, who were very hostile to Catholicism. After the defeat, death or exile of most of the Roman Catholic Irish leaders, he was elected nominal commander of the Roman Catholic forces for the remainder of the conflict. Edmund O'Reilly succeeded to the see, but owing to the difficulties of the time was only able to spend 2 years in the diocese out of the 12 of his incumbency. He was exiled on 4 occasions. During the whole time he spent in the diocese, he was hiding in woods and caves and never had any bed but a cloak thrown over straw. He opposed Peter Valesius Walsh, the author of the Loyal Remonstrance 1661-1672 to King Charles II, and died in exile in France. The next primate was Oliver Plunkett. Shortly after his accession to the see, he was obliged to defend the primatial rights of Armagh against the claims put forward for Dublin by its Archbishop, Peter Talbot. At a meeting of the Roman clergy in Dublin in 1670, each of these prelates refused to subscribe subsequent to the other. Plunkett thereupon wrote a work on the ancient rights and prerogatives of his see, published in 1672, under the title just primatial, or the ancient preeminence of the See of Armagh above all the other archbishops in the Kingdom of Ireland, asserted by OATHP Talbot, replied to 2 years later in a dissertation styled Primate of All Ireland, all the chief reasons on which the Church of Dublin relies in the possession and prosecution of her right to the primacy of Ireland. A violent persecution stilled the controversy for some time, and subsequent primates asserted their authority from time to time in Dublin. In 1719, 2 briefs of Pope Clement XI were in favour of the claims of Armagh. In practice, however, the primatial right has fallen into desuetude in Ireland as in every other part of the Church. In 1679, Oliver Plunkett was arrested on a charge of conspiring to bring 20,000 Frenchmen into the country and of having levied moneys on his clergy for the purpose of maintaining 70,000 men for an armed rebellion against the Crown. After being confined in Dublin Castle for many months, he was presented for trial on these and other charges in Dundalk, but the jury, though all Protestants, refused to find a true bill against him. The venue, however, of his trial was changed to London, where he was tried by a jury before he was able to gather his witnesses and bring them across, though he made the request to the judge. The principal witnesses against him were some priests and friars of Armagh whom he had censured and suspended for their alleged conduct. He was dragged on a sledge to Tyburn on 1 July 1681, where he was hanged, drawn, and quartered in presence of an immense multitude. His head, still in a good state of preservation, can be viewed to this day in St. Peter's Church, West Street, Drogheda. In this segment, we'll be unravelling the complexities of penal times and exploring its multifaceted nature. Dominic Maguire, a Dominican, succeeded to the see after the death of the Oliver Plunkett. This primate, having to go into exile after the surrender of Limerick in 1691, spent the 16 years that intervened between that time and his death in a very destitute condition. In the meantime, the See of Armagh was administered by a vicar, Patrick Donnelly, a priest of the diocese, who in 1697 was appointed Bishop of Dromore, though retaining the administration of Armagh for several years afterwards. Owing to the severity of the laws, there was no primate resident in Ireland for 23 years after the flight of Primate Maguire in 1691. Hugh McMahon, Bishop of Clogher, was at last appointed to the bereft see. Living during the worst of the penal times, the primate was obliged constantly to wander from place to place, saying Mass and administering confirmation in the open air. Nevertheless, in spite of these difficulties, he has left his name to posterity by the learned work Just Primatial Armaghanum, written by command of the Pope in defence of the primatial rights of Armagh. He was succeeded by his nephew, Bernard McMahon, then Bishop of Clogher, who is described as a prelate remarkable for zeal, charity, prudence, and sound doctrine. He also suffered considerably from the persecution, and spent most of his time in hiding. Bernard was succeeded in the primacy by his brother, Ross McMahon, also Bishop of Clogher. Michael O'Reilly, Bishop of Derry, was the next primate. He published 2 catechisms, one in Irish and the other in English, the latter of which has been in use in parts of the north of Ireland until our own time. On one occasion, this primate and 18 of his priests were arrested near Dundalk. He lived in a small thatched cottage at Milltown, in Termonfeckin parish, and at times had to lie concealed in a narrow loft under the thatch. Anthony Blake was his successor. The persecution having subsided to a great extent, he was not harried like his predecessors, but nevertheless could not be induced to live permanently in his diocese, a circumstance which was the occasion of much discontent among his clergy and led to temporary suspension from his duties. Richard O'Reilly was his successor in the primacy. Having an independent fortune, he was the first Catholic prelate since the Revolution who was able to live in a manner becoming his station. By his gentleness and affability he succeeded in quieting the dissensions which had distracted the diocese during the time of his predecessor, and was thenceforward known as the Angel of Peace. In 1793 he laid the foundation stone of St. Peter's Church in Drogheda, which was to serve as his pro-cathedral. one of the first Catholic churches to be built within the walls of a town in Ireland since the Reformation. The Corporation of Drogheda, wearing their robes and carrying the mace and sword, appeared on the scene and forbade the ceremony to proceed, but their protest was disregarded. Brace yourselves for the next chapter, where we'll be dissecting 19th and 20th centuries. Patrick Curtis, who had been rector of the Irish College of Salamanca, was appointed to the see in more hopeful times, and lived to witness the emancipation of the Roman Church in the UK. He was one of the first to join the Catholic Association, and was on friendly terms with the Duke of Wellington, whom he had met in Spain during the Peninsular War. Thomas Kelly succeeded Curtis. He lived and died with the reputation of a saint. William Crawley succeeded him. He was the first Catholic primate to reside in Armagh and perform episcopal functions there since the introduction of the penal laws. He began construction of St. Patrick's Cathedral, which took more than 60 years to bring to completion. The foundation stone was laid 17 March 1840, and before the primate's death, the walls had been raised to a considerable height. Paul Cullen succeeded in 1849, but was translated to the See of Dublin in 1852. In 1850 he presided over the National Synod of Thurles, the first synod held in Ireland since the Convention of the Bishops and Clergy in Kilkenny in 1642. Joseph Dixon, the next primate, held a synod in Drogheda in 1854, at which all the northern bishops assisted. Archbishop Dixon resumed the building of the cathedral, but did not live to see it finished. Michael Kieran succeeded, residing in Dundalk during his tenure of the primatial see. His successor, Daniel McGettigan, spent 3 years of earnest labour in the completion of the cathedral, and was able to open it in 1873. He was succeeded by Cardinal Michael Logue, who succeeded to the primacy in 1887. He was the first primate of Armagh to become a member of the College of Cardinals. He devoted himself for several years to the task of beautifying and completing in every sense the noble edifice. In the building of the sacristy, library, synod hall, muniment room, the purchase in fee simple of the site, and the interior decorations and altars, he spent more than £50,000 sterling on the cathedral. This great cathedral was consecrated on 24 July 1904. Cardinal Vincenzo Vanutelli, representing Pope Pius X, was present at the consecration. Now, let's shift our attention to Redemptoris Mater Seminary. A house of formation was founded in 2012 by Cardinal Sean Brady, and in 2016, the Redemptoris Mater Seminary was officially opened in the former De La Salle Monastery, in Dundalk, County Louth, in the Archdiocese of Armagh. It is a diocesan seminary that operates under the auspices of the New Catechumenal Way. Seminarians travel to Maynooth College for philosophical and theological studies. The first ordination took place in 2014. Giuseppe Pollio from Italy serves as rector of the seminary. In 2022, Archbishop Eamon Martin laid the foundation stone for an extension to the seminary. Without further ado, let's move on to the topic of adult faith programs. The Armagh Diocese, in conjunction with St. Patrick's College, Maynooth, commenced in 2019 certificate, diploma and degree programs in theology, adult education and pastoral ministry in Armagh and Dundalk. The Archdiocese of Armagh is one of the regional locations where Maynooth run the Diploma in Diaconate Studies program. Our focus now turns to ordinaries, an important aspect of our discussion. List of recent Archbishops: Michael Kieran, Daniel McGettigan, Cardinal Michael Logue, Cardinal Patrick O'Donnell, Cardinal Joseph McCrory, Cardinal John Dalton, Cardinal William John Conway, Cardinal Thomas Feach, Cardinal Cole Daly, Cardinal Sean Brady, Eamon Martin. 2014 present. Remember to follow me on social media for behind-the-scenes content and updates.